my next presenter is called Cristiano Cunha, and he will correct me. And he will correct me if I pronounce his surname wrong when he comes on. And there he is. How are you, Christian? And a little bit, about you. I see solution architect, testing advocate, and what I like about what you do. And but my first presenter is that he produced an X-ray of his kneecap to prove a point. And here you are, you're an advocate at X-ray doing something. So I find that was really a very quirky.
A good connection of subjects, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And that in itself was, that's awesome. So, I mean, without having taken up any more time, what we're going to do here, folks, is you're going to hear Christian talk about how to stop the tooling avalanche. Christian, the floor is yours.
Yeah, that's it. So I'm here to talk about a little bit of, a part of my journey where I was really overwhelmed with tools. So I'm here to talk about how I, at that time, stopped the tooling avalanche that was happening on that place. But before that, and thank you for your introduction, but I'm going to do it again. I usually use always now this presentation that Nikolai Advolkin did for me in the Test Automation podcast that he has. So I'm going to read it for you guys, and then I'm going to complete it a little bit. But it goes like this. So in the realm of code, where the tests are key, comes Cristiano Cunha, a legend you'll see. From X-ray by X-Plane, he crafts his design, making testing an art, not just a straight line. Solution architect in testing is grand, for deconstructing flaky tests is the best in the land. Today on our conference, we'll delve into the core of a tool adoption and so much more. From Test Skill Podcast to Systems the guest fame, is a voice in the field, a significant name. So tune in, dear viewers, for insights so grand. In the world of test automation is the man with a plan. Well, I really liked it, so I'm repeating it over and over every time I get the stage, and this is one of those times. But in a nutshell, like you said, I'm a solution architect, test advocate, and X-ray. X-ray is actually a test management tool that lives within Jira. And as many of us, I started as a developer, really, a long time ago, let's say, in mobile devices. And then the opportunity was presented to me to start being part of a quality team, still on the side, Silhouette team and things like that. And since that, I never stopped. So I upgraded into quality, into testing. And I really enjoyed it, and I continue my path. Really, most of my path was focused on automation, focused on then later on DevOps, into pipelines, into how to automate the full process to deliver things into production. So, and let me just start by saying that actually tests or quality is actually more than just tests. And I see a lot of times the discussions going into the specifics of should we use functional tests? Should we use security tests? Should we do this? Should we do that? And nowadays, I believe that the area has grown so much and evolved so much that the applications are not only simple applications that we put in production. They are actually big social technical systems that are actually composed by tools, software, and actually how people are interacting with it. So the tester role has also evolved. We are no longer the gatekeepers where we say if there are no bugs anymore on the application that it can go into production or not. And we are spreading the message. We are pushing the quality mindset towards everyone that is on the team. So help me spread the message. Sometimes we are fast into talking about the specificities of tests instead of talking about quality overall. And this talk is really about that, because actually I'm going to talk about how I managed to slow down the adoption of tools and how it actually has increased the quality overall of my solution. So let me start by sharing how all of this started. So I started in a small startup company where we were, I don't know, 24 of people responsible for 2 big monoliths, you know, the back end, the front end, and that was it. And well, we were full. We handle everything, since the coding, testing, not so much testing at that time, but coding, pushing applications to production, maintaining it there. And everything was going so well that we grew so much. Then actually we started to change the way things were doing. And we started to divide this team. So we hired more people. We divide the teams into smaller teams. We actually started to have testers and product managers inserted into the teams to have that kind of agile mindset adoption. And we started also dividing these monoliths into kind of a network of microservices. And of course, this has actually complicated things. And we had also, well, each of these changes is supported by tools. And each time we change something, even if the workflow or the process, we need tools that will support that, either adopting new ones or adapting the ones that we have. And of course, at that time, we wanted more. We wanted to be faster to deliver to production. We wanted to be able to put things in a more reliable and sustainable way into production. And well, everything was aligned, and the DevOps movement started to appear, and we started to, well, probably DevOps is the thing that we wanted to do. And guess what? It will require tools also to be able to support this new change. So what do I want to say with this? Basically is, no matter where you are on your journey, either if you are fighting to have or apply the compliances that you need on your company, or adopting Agile, or shaping into DevOps, or adding security into your process, if you are choosing a specific tool or framework, like a testing framework, or even the big problem I had in the past was choosing the right temperature of the air conditioner. And believe it or not, we had a small tool just for a voting section for everyone to have the correct temperature. We never got it right, so don't let fool yourself. But that's it. So tools are everywhere, actually. And at the end of the day, the responsible adoption of tools will slow down your delivery and actually make your quality to decay. And that's what really happened to me. Throughout all of those changes, I end up being overwhelmed by tools. And, you know, developers are characters that are really, let's say, the artists in our company. And as any artists, they want to have the cooler tool, the cooler framework to work with. And we cannot limit their liberty to choose that. So we were kind of, we wanted to reduce the adoption of tools, but we don't want to hinder their capability to choose those tools. But before jumping into the solution, let me just show you the real impacts that I felt throughout all of these changes, and because of that tool adoption. So I really start to feel impacts in 4 big areas. One was in knowledge, one more in the integration side of things. The maintenance was also a big pain that we have, and we will see that the impacts are connected to pain, and the standards. So starting with knowledge, actually what we started to see is that we had a lot of problems in the installation and maintenance of so many tools, because the expectation is all of the teams that are maintaining and installing tools into production need to have the knowledge to do so, needs to know how to install a proper application or framework, need to know how to react if something goes wrong, need to know how to maintain that tool into production. And that knowledge was not spread around. So if one team wanted one tool and he wanted to put it in production, that tool was not, the knowledge of how to maintain that is not flowing correctly. And it's just impossible to have one team to know all of the tools of all the company if we don't stop the variability of the tools that we are adopting. The other thing that is kind of linked to this one is lack of experience. So if we have a tool that's pretty recent, we don't have anyone with experience that will know what to do if something happens with that tool. And bear in mind that when we are putting things into production, we want everything to work. And if something doesn't go wrong, doesn't go right, if it goes wrong, actually, we wanted to know who to call. And if no one has experience, that will be a big issue and a problem. Another one is visibility. You know, when you start spreading and having multiple teams, and in one team you adopt one tool, and in another team you adopt another tool, there are no really any mechanism or process or workflow that will make that knowledge flow and that visibility be available for all of the teams, making that one team is adopting one tool that actually will solve one problem that is the same problem that the other team will have, but probably the other team will adopt another tool. And then we end up having two different tools solving the same problem. So the lack of visibility is also an issue, or were also an issue. And by the previous example I just showed is also, with so many tools, they are so different things spread in different teams, areas, that everything starts to be scattered. And that is true for knowledge, and we'll see for the other areas around. But basically, we were asking the impossible. That is, at the time, we had one team responsible for production, and that team will need to know everything about all of the tools of all of the teams we have in the company, and know how to install, how to maintain, how to share that information. So it's just impossible. We needed to control that and to have a proper process in place. But the other pain that we felt was also in integration. And in here, sometimes when we adopt a tool, we are just thinking of how it will solve our problem. But actually, we need to think of how will this tool work with the system I already have in place for my company, for my team, for my process of delivery. And sometimes, even though the tool is the best one to solve your challenge, it is not the best one to integrate in your current system. So one of the things that happened to us is the tool was good to solve one specific team problem, but it requires too many steps to make it work. And when we wanted to go faster and faster, having too many steps, manual steps in the process was not what we wanted to have. So that was a problem in the integration of that tool with the current systems. The other one happened also was, but wait, if we have too many manual steps, we can build an integration that will solve that for us, and we'll create a custom code to integrate those two tools into our process in our system. But even this brings other sets of problems, because once you branch a code, or you create custom code to integrate one tool, you will need someone to maintain that code. You will need someone with experience with it. You will need someone that will react when a new version of that tool appears, if a change on that tool appears. And you know how the internal teams are. When you have a tool, they will need new things. They will want to add different things to it. So probably what will happen is everyone will need new things for it. And while we are asking to it, who will be responsible of the code? We will produce new versions. How will these new versions will behave into what we already have? What are the impacts of creating these new versions? So all of this started to build up and to create more and more problems into the adoption of tools. And yeah, and the other one is, of course, we need another tool to integrate this one, because with these two tools now we can integrate and make it perfectly fit into our system. But don't forget that as much more tools that you integrate into your process, it will create actually more failure points, and it will be harder to maintain, and the impacts will be harder to understand. And it's simply not one of the things we wanted to have. So the other big area that we felt problems with was maintenance, as I touched linked to the knowledge. Like I said, more tools will mean more failure points in your process. So we needed to have that knowledge of how to maintain that tool, but not only the knowledge of that tool isolated. We needed to know what will happen if that tool will fail, and what happens to the process that will use that tool if it fails. Do we have alternative paths that we can use without that tool working? Will it break completely our workflow into production or not? We need to know what to do if that it's actually a failure point. We need to validate that extra failure point and know how to react to it. So maintenance and knowledge come tied together, and so we were thinking of, well, probably we needed to have less tools in production to reduce this. So we need to have the right amount of tools, let's say. And talking about production, if you had more tools into production, of course, it started to be a nightmare, because it's like I said, if you have, well, microservices is no easy. And if you start adding tools over it, it will be really hard to know what went wrong or what to do if it fails, or even if something appears into the version of that tool, meaning that if a vulnerability is found on the version that we are using into production, what should we do? Should we upgrade to the proper version? And what will be the impacts of the upgrade? Can we have downtime because of it? Should we not have downtime because of it? Does the tool provide the ability to not have downtime? All of those questions will be coming too late in the game for us. And well, when we were installing something into production and the teams were expecting to have that, those questions started to rise, but it was already too late, because the release will depending on that tool. And we wanted to change that. So in a bit, we're going to see how we change this process. And the customization, like I said before, is also not only a problem of integration, is also a problem of maintenance, because we wanted to know which version of that custom code that we have works with X and Z version of what we have in production. So customizations will need a proper team to support. We'll need proper documentation, and we need persons with experience that will know or can help into understanding what will happen if something of this this possibility can happen. And one of the no-nos is having tools that are not yet official, meaning that we don't have yet official versions of those tools. So one of the things we did was well, no, we don't want to have beta versions, because one of the things is we don't have the ability, well, even if you have a beta version that is stopped in time, we don't want that, because we really want to install only official versions into production. Of course, it doesn't solve everything, but it brings us another level of confidence to see that we have an official version and that we have some teams working and we have a roadmap, and we know that a new version is coming, and we know that that tool is alive. And if something happened regarding security or performance, probably a new version can emerge, an official one that could solve our problem. Otherwise, we will just be by ourselves, and sometimes it's really hard to maintain that in production. And of course, a lot of tools will bring that problem that is, oh my God, how do I manage all of those licenses that I need to have into production? How do I know when a tool will end these licenses? Who will handle the process of acquiring a new license in time that the old one will be available? What will happen if that license ends before we are able to renew it? What will happen to the tool? Will it be read-only? Will it be totally unusable? What will happen into workflow? So all of those questions sometimes just slipped our minds, and we just focus on how good the tool is to solve our problem. But all of this comes attached to the adoption of a new tool. And one of my biggest concerns when we were adopting tools at that company was actually standards. And standards, when we were just a small startups, were not that big of I will not say problem, but will not bored us so much to look into, because, well, everyone was doing everything. But as you start to grow, you start to have more demands, you start to have different ways of putting things into production, and you start to have different needs and different expectations of your application and of your customers towards your application. So for example, we started to be like one or two big monolithic applications, front-end, back-end. And as you remember, we shifted into a multitude of microservices. And while we were doing so, we also shifted into multi-region deployment into production. That means that we will have different data center, one for America, one for Europe, for instance, where the deployment process will push the application in both of those data centers to be closer to our clients. But then one of the things that we wanted to do is having proper logging, error messages, and performance of those microservices. And that actually was start being a problem when we went that path, meaning that I don't want to go to all of the machines that I have into production to see the logs and try to understand what went wrong. One of the demands that we have is we want all of the tools and applications and frameworks that we are installing into production to ship the logging into a central system that we have ready into production, and we can access to see all of the logs that are happening into production with proper identification, proper format, and all of that. Another thing that was happening is, oh my God, when you use APIs and microservices, you can have a multitude of error messages that says really nothing. So, and that started to happen. Or you have the proper HTTP errors, but the message is just gibberish. So it doesn't say you anything that will help you actually solve the problem or to understand what's the source of the issue. And we were also a little bit worried because we went from nothing to everything. So all of the messages were the error messages were really descriptive, and we know what would happen. But if we know, an attacker will know also. And revealing too much information on the error messages is also harmful. So we kind of had to balance a little bit between both and try to have a proper format that will let us know what's happening, but not too much that will let external attacker to take advantage of that. And of course, performance. When we have a system that depends of multiple calls of multiple services, all of those services need to have a certain expectation, a certain standard regarding performance. And we started to talk with teams and ask them, so what's the performance that you are expecting to have of this new API that you will build in the next months? And they say, and well, you know what the answer is we don't know. And that will not work. And I know that it's hard to try to understand how we want or to perceive how we will be the performance of something that is not yet built, but we need to have a target. We need to point to something, to need to have a goal, at least to understand that when I'm developing and we need to have performance tests, of course, to validate that the performance is what we expect it to be. And we need to go towards that goal. So we can start not that performant and then start working into having it to the standards that the company requires. Because if we have 5 microservices and each one of them take 1 second to process a request, it will just lose 5 seconds to process a request just because of the calls between the different APIs. So it doesn't make sense. So we need to understand how those microservices will interact and what's the performance of that experience where all of the microservices will be. And with that performance in mind, what each one of those services may have or lose into the performance that they are outputting. And of course, security, because, well, we were an e-commerce site, and we know we have payments, we have personal data, PII data of our clients, and we start to have some requirements in order to be able to have those kinds of functionalities. And security was always present after that. Security in the logging. We cannot spill personal information on the logs. We cannot have too much things stated in the log. We cannot install certain application on the same security zone of other applications because they cannot interchange communications. So all of that needs to be defined from the starting point. So this was all our pains, all of our impacts. And we were having a lot of suggestions of new tools coming from different teams. And well, in the past, we just accepted it and installed into production, but that we were just pushing the problem into production, and then it will just came back to us. So we started to think, how can we start? Remember, not limiting just because we want the adoption of tools for the developers and the teams, but try to control and make them understand what it means to adopt a new tool in this company. So actually, sorry, I just heard a peewee. I was just checking if it's something that was someone talking to me, but no. So we kind of find this technology radar that was actually put out or shared by Zalando. It was actually ThoughtWorks initial effort that was there. And it actually is a tool. Well, yes, I'm going to adopt a tool to solve my problem of tools. But the technology radar is supposed to be a snapshot of the tools, techniques, platforms, languages, and frameworks, but based on practical experience of the workers of your company. In this case, this is the definition of ThoughtWorks, so thought workers around the world. And this is actually a radar that is divided per areas. As you can see, we have different areas, so there are different buckets available where we divide the tools and frameworks that we are either trialing in use, assessing, or not using. And then we place them into a radar of adoption. And that will bring actually visibility for all of the teams. It allows us to have a separate evolution of each one of the tools throughout the rings, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it further ahead. And it helps us also enhance the search. So as you see, the radar has actually 4 rings. We have the in-use rings. It's actually the technology that we know that we can use, and we know that other teams are already using. So we have the knowledge, we have the experience, and we know that it's following all that we have defined into our tool process adoption. So these are the okay tools to use. If you have an issue, if you want to solve a challenge, you will go, the first instinct will be, let me go to the radar, see of the in-use tools, if I can use anything from there that will solve my problem. If not, you have also the ability to trial some of the things. And this is the other outer ring, are the tools where some engineers have already walked this path and share knowledge. These are tools that are already being experimented by some teams in production, but are not yet approved. So they are in the trial process, making sure that they are fulfilling the standards that we are expecting for logging, for performance, that we have the correct knowledge in place, that we can share information and documentation that are valuable for all of our users. They are still on trial, and one of two things can happen is either it will be in use or it will not be evolving into in use and probably fall back into assets or on hold, depending on the conclusions that we will have. The other ring is assets. So we have some tools that are promising. We know that they may have value to solving our issues, but we don't have yet anything defined regarding experimenting them. So we are just assessing if they are valuable tools. If we don't have any tool within our in-use or trial rings that solve already that kind of challenge, if they probably will be able to follow our standards. And this is how everything starts. It's on the assess ring, actually. And of course, we have also the old ring. The old is the not recommended to be used, not worth investing into. This ring will hold all of the tools and frameworks that we choose, or the company choose, that will not use, either because the process of adoption didn't go well and it doesn't make sense to adopt, or we know beforehand that there's no way that we can use those tools given what we expect them to be on our systems. And another piece of information that is important, so below what we see that I just showed on the actual radar with the areas, we also have on the bottom this kind of information. Because once you start sharing this information, you need something that will explain what is a take radar, because, well, you must assume that not everyone in your company will know what this is. You need to know what is the purpose of it, and how do we maintain it. This is important because the process of adoption needs to be present in everyone in your company, or at least in the majority of them. When someone asks about it, someone in your team must be able to recognize what is a technology radar, how to do it, or at least pointing into the link and to knowing more of the radar. So this is a good tool, but we still need to implement it, because this tool is cool once you have already the process in place and you are just showing the results of it. And for us, implementing the take radar was actually, we needed, well, I'm going to, a lot of steps, but the 4 big ones was actually how to infuse the standards into process. How did we find our champions? How do we will process, and for us it worked on monthly basis. So how did we evolve the tool adoption itself in the monthly spotlight, and what kind of visibility we wanted to have? So regarding infusing standards, it was actually a very good way for us to start talking about standards, understanding what are company standards, what are our company standards. And you'll know that the company standards will evolve along the time and are not the same for all of the companies, depending on the business you are trying to do, depending on the support where you want it to be. So it's a really good way to understand first what are the standards in your company, what your company expect of your applications and services that you have in production. And this is really focused in production. If you want to adopt a tool that will never be used in production or in the process of putting things into production, you can use it and not follow the process of adoption. If you expect it to be installed in the software delivery lifecycle or in production, you need to follow the standards. And you need to make the standards part of the process, meaning that the tool adoption process that we'll define, and may be different for every company, must have ways to make sure that the standards that you just talked about of your company are part of the process. Meaning that even if one team does not know that we need to have a centralized logging system, when they are adopting a tool, the process will lead them to that. Meaning that throughout the steps of the process, one of the steps will be, are you pushing the logs into this system? And they say, no, why should I? Because we have a central logging system and all of the logs are going there. And we have documentation supporting that, and we have other tools doing that. So you can have examples of it. And documentation, of course, you need to create documentation that will support the process of adoption. The radar is actually one of those pieces. That is actually the entry piece. And I haven't shown, but each one of the dots within the radar will have information of that specific tool. Who is what is the version or versions that we support, who is using it already, and all relevant information that you think it's useful for each one of the tools. And you need to cover everything that your company finds that a standard is important to: security, performance, compliance, or any other thing that you need to have. So on my example, so things that we did in order to infuse those standards is actually, well, the central logging system and all of the frameworks and languages that we were adopting will need to have the ability to send that to the central logging system in a correct format without leaking PII data. And that's tricky to do, but, well, we needed to have some tools and eyes validating that. Of course, the testing tools for us mean that we need those tools to integrate seamlessly with Jenkins. That was actually our orchestrator to put things, to build our pipelines and put things into production and produce unit results. Because we were at the time working with SpecFlow over the unit results to produce those reports. So we needed to have that available and compliant with the test tools. And while we evolved towards DevOps, we also made changes into the development and into how the infrastructure would handle into production. And for us, we started to use Docker and images. And it actually helped us because we infuse within the Docker image the security tools that will need to be installed in each and every application that we wanted to have in production. So the base image that was allowed to be used within the company was only the one that was already infused with security and traceability and monitoring tools that we wanted to have within our company. So that was one of the things that we did to assure that the standards were already being followed. The other thing was find champions. You know, we cannot do this alone, and we cannot involve everyone in the company. It's impossible. And, you know, there will always be the ones that say, well, why did you not invite me? But because we cannot invite everyone in the company to be part of our champions to represent this adoption. So choose representatives that are actually involved, meaning that they are present not only in more experienced circles, but also into the teams, that are able to discuss technicalities and overall architecture to understand how will that tool, how that framework will fit into the system. They need to have that kind of knowledge. They need to be involved within the team, so having the synchronicity between what the teams are asking for and what the radar is having, and is the channel that will push information back and forward towards the teams, and that are also decision makers, that are ability to provide a decision of, well, together with other champions, if we are going to adopt, to assess, to hold some kind of tools or frameworks. For us, what worked was actually architects. We have a mix of champions with architects and senior infrastructure engineers, because the architects were in our company were divided into pillars of teams, and one pillar was like a set of 4 teams, and that architect was responsible for that team and deciding how those services produced by those teams will fit within the overall system that we have. And the infrastructure engineers actually were the ones knowing how production works, how security areas are defined, what are the machines, the VMs that we are using, what are the Docker tools that we are using. So it was a good mix of champions that we find to be representative of teams, of what they need, and also capable of deciding what to go, what to evolve towards production. And we give it, like I said, a monthly spotlight. That means actually that we have the ability to every month gather the champions, and every time that we need to take a decision between the rings, the teams involved into that assessment is also invited to this meeting to show up the results that they have, where we actually discuss the evolution through stages. So we assess the results of the experiments of the teams. We assess if something, or what is the process if we want to pass a tool to hold because of whatever reason, and what we need to do. Also identify what are the teams that are using it, identify what are the steps to take every team out of it, and it can be different for everyone. They need to be present, so they need to be present in all of the meetings. So the monthly spotlight need to have the representative. If you don't have quorum, don't do the meeting. It will not serve nothing. We need to make sure that the information is updated on the radar, on the documentation sites of each one of the tools. And for us, it was actually a monthly meeting. And of course, at the time, to spread information, it's just pushing an email for everyone. Yeah, it's another email for the trash, but the information is there. If you want, you can go to trash, assess the link, and see what changed, what not changed. And of course, the online Take Radar is a link that is available for the entire company to go and assess. Of course, you need to know the link, but it's on the email. It's on, someone will know it, or else we didn't do the right job. And visibility, because if we do all of this, but you don't bring visibility either to the information produced or the process, it doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve for anything, because nobody will know about it, nobody will follow it, and it will be hard for anyone to comply with it. So define your Take Radar, and you can adjust it. You will see that this is a version that is a little bit old. There are already evolutions over it, where we focus in one thing, where we change the rings into different ones that are more suitable to your process. You need to be really, it's really important to keep it alive. So update, share it to everyone. Make sure that the link is available 24/7, because if someone needs to choose a tool, they need to be able to assess that information, and share the process with everyone. This is the part that is a little bit tricky. Like I said, we try having an email. We have an online endpoint accessible to everyone, and we try to start infusing on the onboarding of everyone that was joining the company this information. So one of the pieces of information, one of the things that were talked into the onboarding of each one of the new members of the company is actually the tooling adoption process. So this kind of solve most of our problems. And I believe that's it. So my message for you is, if you have too much tools, you feel that you don't know the standards of your company, or you think that, well, it's a mess to maintain things into production, or you just don't know what the other team is using, start suggesting a technology radar. Start small, start with an area with, I don't know, quality. Start to know what are the tools that are in the company being used for quality, what are they solving, try to gather that information, find the right persons, find your champions, try to find what is a champion for you, and then start gathering that information, share it, and you'll see that more and more people will want to get involved, and we will find the right champion. Champion is also something that evolves throughout the time as the company also reorganizes itself. But you will find that it's an iteration that you need to have for adopting the right things, to evolve into the right process also. We will not nail it at the first time. So experiment, evolve, and let's try to stop the tools avalanche together. And actually, that's my last slide, so I hope you enjoyed. I sure did. So thank you, everyone. Any questions?
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I actually, very informative, by the way, and I like how you solved the whole tool avalanche within your own company domain. That's brilliant. I have a question here, and the question relates to the actual tool selection. You come into a company, there are a lot of teams doing a lot of different things. How do you go about deciding which tools to keep and which ones to get rid of in your tool selection?
Yeah, that's the answer from the more experienced testers is always it depends. Mm-hmm. But it really is. So it depends on, I will say, for us, when we started this and we started to see see everything or every tool that were used in the company, and we started to have a list of those tools and understand first, what are the teams that are using it? What are the applications that are using it? Well, linked to the teams, to understand what are the impact of removing such a tool. And just with that information, you can already remove some of the tools. You also need to find common challenges from the team. So what are they trying to solve with that tools? Because sometimes they have tools that are solving the challenge, but not on the better with a better experience. And we have other tools, sorry, that allow them to do so. So have an overview of everything that is being used, understand what are the usage of each one of the tools, and then start looking at the standards. So what are the standards in your company? Look at if that tool is able to, for me, is able to produce logs in a central logging system, is able to have the correct performance given what I expect. If not, is it the right tool to have? So starting to have those questions. It's not a written process, but I think it's something that you need to adjust to your needs in your company.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's really good. But now we have to think about, you have, let's say, team A, B, and C. Now team A, B, and C, they work on completely different projects, and they use completely different tooling. Yeah, and the argument is, but this is the better tool for what I do, and this is the better tool for what I do, and this is better for what you do. How do we as a company, yeah, that's the way to say it. How do we then as a company put together something that would say, okay, out of all the tools you guys using, you know what, this one here will do all this, and this one here will do all that. And then how do you deal with the pushbacks from the people who are going to lose the one they have to adopt this new one?
Yeah, that's the hardest of the process. First is they think that we are trying to limit their adoption, what is not true. We're trying to guide their adoption. So having that change of mindset is already one challenge. And then when we came up to that kind of decisions, bear in mind that it's not, when we say the company has chosen this tool, it's not really the company. It's the mix of the more experienced persons in the company. So the champions you have chosen should be representatives and understanding of what are the standards expected from the company, what are the tools, what are the architecture of the systems that you have, what are the organization of the infrastructure that you have in production, giving all of that. And the decision is not taken by one person, it's taken by the community of champions that are representative of the teams. So, and well, you have to live with the choices. At the end of the day, also, what happens is the company is here to produce money most of the time. So you are working towards that. And if the company have certain standards, it's not how do I say, it's not easy to say no to a team, but sometimes you have to do it and cope with the decision and try to help them migrate. I think that's a big must. That is, understand what is the effort into migrate to this new tool. And sometimes, and we had like migrations that took years, depending on what you wanted to do, how the application works. And remember, when you have monoliths that have old versions of old frameworks that nobody touches, getting out of it takes a lot of time. But making sure, for instance, that the new things that you are doing will follow the new tool that you are adopting. So for at least the new things, will be on that new tool or framework or language. And eventually, the other one will follow. It's not easy. It's not just a decision that slices and says, well, you stop now and use the new one right away. You need to have openness for adjusting the migration of those tools for each one of the teams, and show them that even if it's not the best option for them now, it will be for the future. So it's an investment that they will need to do.
Okay, that's lovely. Now I have a very interesting question for you, and I thought about it, and I thought to myself, you know what? Yeah, here it goes. This is your personal. This is a personal opinion we're looking at here. In your personal opinion, right now, do you think companies do you think companies should adopt a lot of AI-related tools? One, and two, yeah, it must be us, right? Because we're the AI revolute. So, and that's one. And two, do you think the use of, let's say, AI toolings or AI-powered toolings, whenever you want to phrase it, is good for the system? And if so, why?
Well, this is, again, my personal opinion.
Yeah, your personal opinion.
I don't think we are in the stage where the AI tooling or assistants or whatever are in the state where they can be just used straight away in your processes, in your companies. I believe they started to be really helpful assistants, giving you ideas, giving you or helping you in tedious tasks, but they are not yet, I wouldn't trust the output of those tools yet 100%, meaning that all of the outputs of those tools need to be reviewed by someone with experience to know what they are, to control what they are doing, because some of the results are so far-fetched sometimes that we cannot trust them. I believe, though, that if we don't start to have tools with AI abilities in your assets ring, in your company, you will fall behind in the following years. So I would say, no, I don't see any, for the moment, I don't see any tool that yet is ready for be using 100% on a company yet. I see good progresses, but I will say that we will need to be aware of what's happening, because if you miss that boat, you will for sure lose. And that links to what the impacts that you were talking about. So what the impact of having, imagine that we have such a tool within. So for me, those tools are still lacking the context, the understanding of your company, meaning that they are so generic yet that they will suggest you more generic things. They are good, for instance, if you look into quality, to say, I'm going to test login operation. What are your tests that you suggest for this context? And they are good to start pitching ideas from it, and then you evolve over it. I believe that's useful. But just clicking a button and say, generate tests for the logging, run them, and if they fail, I will not deploy into production, I don't believe that will work. So yeah. It's a tricky question, but I really would love to see good tools. But I believe that sometimes because we are so used to tools nowadays, that we are not used to have a tool that will need to learn before being used fully. So if you purchase a tool that have AI in a generic way, you will need to give him time to learn your context, to learn how you work, what is expected, what is your workflows, for him to provide useful information. If you just expect them to know everything and just put an optimal solution for you, you'll be dead wrong and it will not go well for you.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, it was one of them, your personal thoughts, and I just had to put it in there in the context because, as you know, everything is all AI. And yeah, so Christian, thank you very much for this chat. Very, very interesting. It was lovely having you. It was lovely having you on the talk.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I loved it also.